Hey guys, it's Will here, hope you're doing well. Tonight's video is going to be something a little bit different. I'm going to be chronicling my progress on restoring an old miniature. So it's not going to be so much a tutorial, like a painting tutorial on every step that I did, but rather kind of just a general talk through what I've been doing and following the progress of this model. Now, as you can see, here is our subject, an Avatar of Khaine, and he's in a bit of a state, you could say. He's in pieces, he's got a terrible paint job, you know, it's not even a completed paint job, and it's, yeah, not great. He appears to have been painted without undercoat, you've got bits of metal showing through. He's not in good condition, but that's perfectly fine. I picked him up for a £5 on eBay, which for what he has the potential to become is well worth it. You know, I think this is a nice little project. It's going to take me a bit of time to do, but you know, it's nice to have something a bit different to work on. Now, the first thing we're obviously going to want to do is strip off all this paint, then going to assemble him. Probably pin the arms in place because they look like they could do with some pinning, and then give him a nice fresh paint job to lead my army. So yeah, the reason I picked this model, other than the price, was it was quite clearly metal because you could see the metal showing through. I didn't want to do this on a fine cast mini because, to be honest, if I wanted a fine cast Avatar, I would just buy the standard fine cast Avatar rather than picking up a second-hand piece that I had to clean up. But wanted the metal, and the metal's going to be much easier to strip as well. I know that the stripping method I'm going to use with Dettol 100% is safe for metal. I don't know if it works for fine cast, probably not, because fine cast melts if you look at it funny, let alone actually put it in chemicals. So yeah, anyway, that's what we're going to do first. We're going to get this guy stripped down. So the first thing we're going to need to do is get all that old paint stripped off. So what I've got here is Dettol in an old glass. This is actually a Nutella mug, but it's just the right size for doing the Avatar. And put some Dettol liquid in there. Dettol make quite a few things, but it's just the normal Dettol liquid. You'll probably find it on the first aid section in your local Boots pharmacy. So we just want to pop the Avatar in there, along with any other bits we want to strip. You can strip multiple pieces at once, but you've got to make sure that there's a little bit of space around them. You don't want pieces clunking. And as you can see, top of his head's poking up there, so in a second I'll just pop some more Dettol in there, and then you want to leave him like this for a good 2-3 hours at least to start the stripping process. That's been in there about 5 or 6 hours now. Had some stuff to do, and if I take him out, you can see the paint is pretty much just flaking off all by itself, and you know, this will literally just come off in your fingertips now, as you can see there. But we do want to make sure we get it all off and we remove all the Dettol from the model, because this is in itself quite stinky stuff and you don't want that left on there. So we want to use a dry toothbrush, and it is important that this is dry, and a bit of washing up liquid. So just checking that I've got this on camera. There we go. So just put a bit of washing up liquid on there, and again, don't add any water. You just start scrubbing it with a toothbrush, and you can see that paint is all coming off really nicely. So I'm going to finish up doing that and then show you the next bit. So you can see now I've got this down to just the bare metal. Did give it a second coat or seconds of dose of Dettol just to get in all the really fine detail areas, like in the chest armour there, just to make sure that was all completely clean. So I've got a nice fresh model to work from, and now I've just got to put him together. Now you could just glue him, but I'm going to actually pin him because you know, with these metal models, sometimes big heavy arms, like particularly this sword arm, aren't going to stay on easily. So what I'm going to do, use the pinning that's already been done on this one. So there's a hole in there that's been drilled out. I'm going to drill a corresponding hole on this arm here using my trusty drill. Put a little bit of paper clip in there to act as a pin, and then glue it together with that super glue. So yeah, I'm going to do that for this arm. It's absolutely essential for this arm, I think, and I'll probably do this side as well because yeah, it's you know, it's still a fairly heavy chunk of metal, but not going to really do it for the hairpiece because the actual way the model's built has that pinned already. So the pins are in, the glue is dry, and as you can see it's all put together. These joints aren't going anywhere anytime soon. This particular Loctite glue I really like. It's just seems to have really good control and just give a really solid finish. But anyway, I'm going to go and get this model base coated now with spray can, and then while that's drying I'll talk a little bit about my process for choosing a colour scheme. So when I'm working on a miniature that's different from what I've painted before, whether it be a standout piece that's different from the rest of the army like this, or if I'm tackling a new army or a new type of unit I've not painted before, I like to get some inspiration and some ideas before I start putting brush to model. And place I usually start is the GW website to see how they did it, but generally don't sort of like to stick completely with the standard schemes, like to get some ideas from elsewhere, and Google Images and Instagram can both be great for these. Incidentally, check out my Instagram, Warhammer Will, but anyway, enough of the cheap plugs. So I'll have a search on there and try and get some ideas, not with a view to copying other people's ideas, but rather drawing inspiration from perhaps certain ways that they've done things and trying to take a look at how they've actually done it. You know, how was that scheme achieved? YouTube also has lots of great painting videos, and I'll sometimes check those out for different techniques. But yeah, as you can see with the GW avatar, they've gone for quite a sort of reddy brown colour scheme, and then quite cartoony armour on there. But I actually prefer some of these darker schemes that people have done where the body is black but you've still got that fire showing through, and some of the GW artwork like this one here, which I believe was from maybe the Eldar Codex or maybe Fracture of Biltan, one of those. That's really nice looking avatar there. And yeah, so looking at doing something like that. Now, one thing that a lot of these feature is headpieces where there's a gradual colour transition. Now, just with the way I paint, I find that quite fiddly to do, but I've found a couple of examples like this one here, where they've done something a bit different. They've done like a sort of crackled fire effect across there, or even just left it black. So I might try something like that, maybe just leaving it black because there's going to be plenty of other detail on the model, or maybe giving it some sort of like fire effect on there, but we shall see. But anyway, let's jump back in and have a look at the model again. So knowing that I'm going for quite a dark colour scheme here, I've obviously gone for a black undercoat. This is just the ordinary Citadel black spray paint, Chaos Black. And yeah, so I need to make a start on painting this guy now. And obviously the first thing to do is just going to be to block out the main colours on the model. So I'm thinking gold for the armour. Obviously the skin's already black. Not quite sure what sort of metallic I'm going to do the sword in yet, still working on that, but got some ideas. And green for the hair, loincloth, either green or white, we'll see how it looks. But yeah, let's get these base colours down. As you can see, made a start on the base colours here. So for the hair and the loincloth, going green, and for that I've used War Flesh, just a nice solid green to give me really good coverage over the black to lighten up later. Base was just XV88 because of the basing scheme I'm using, and for the gold parts of the armour, they're going to be much lighter than this eventually, but I've based them in Warplock Bronze because that gives me a really nice, good sort of base coat to work from. Now for the sword on the front, what other sword does he have? The big sword. Lead Belcher for the base, and then I went ahead and shaded it and highlighted it already. So I've gone Sharable Crimson to give it this sort of glowing red effect, and then dry brushed highlighted that with Runefang Steel. So I think that looks quite nice, like it's sort of glowing with heat from almost within. I think that looks pretty cool, but we'll see how it looks on the whole model, because the sword was one part I wasn't quite sure what sort of scheme I was doing, so we'll see how that goes. Now, you may notice I haven't base coated all the gold parts yet, and that's because as I was working through them, I felt that actually, you know, the gold, although it's a quite a bold, like a big colour on the model, actually it sits quite high on the skin, and some of it kind of goes over or very close to the red where the sort of fire underneath the skin is going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first before I finish off the gold, so it's all the sort of the magma creeping through the joints on this guy. And for that I'm going to base coat in corn red, and then use my sort of normal technique for painting fire on a model. So we're going to be corn red, then a lighter red, which will be Evil Sun Scarlet, then an orange, I've got blazing orange here, and then a yellow, which I don't seem to have to hand at the moment, so I'll have to fish that out. It's going to take quite a while to do this. It's going to be quite a fiddly job because I'm going to have to get into all of these cracks and recesses in the body of this guy, but hopefully that's going to give a really nice finish, and we shall see what it looks like once I've done it. Just a quick look here at how that's progressing. I've just done these back bits first because it's quite nice to see the finished thing on maybe just one area before you decide to go ahead and do it over the whole model, and I'm pretty pleased with how these have turned out, so I'm going to carry on and do that over the whole model. You can see, particularly if I zoom in on this bit here, that I've got it going over onto the edge of the black. That's how I want it to look, so it's kind of like the heat glowing out. But yeah, I'm going to crack on and do the rest of this. An hour or so later and all the fire is done. So if we just lift him up to the camera like that, you can see it's in all the recesses now, and that I'm really pleased with. Actually, it looks great. It does need a little bit of tidying up in a few places, but since that's going to primarily be tidying up with black, I'm going to leave that for a little bit later once I've done the gold and other details as well, because we'll be using black to tidy those up. And that gold is going to be the next step now. For painting sort of ornate decorative gold like this, where it's not the whole area, it's just a small part of the model, or at least, you know, lots of small areas rather than one big area, I don't like to use my normal technique of base coat, wash and then highlight. I like to instead go for a really dark base coat and bypass the washing step. So I'll be using Warplot bronze for this, one of the few gold colours, or well, it's obviously a very dark bronze really, but certainly covers much better than any of the golds. So working over black, that's going to be really important to get the coverage. You can see I've done it in some parts of the model, and this is eventually going to be a lot brighter, but I'm going to start off by working out where all the gold's going to be now and filling that in with Warplot bronze. So all of that bronze has been applied now. You can see it's in places like the runes on the sword and on all this head crest detail here. So that's marked out where the gold is going to be, and then if you just turn him around, you see I've had a little bit of a practice at the overall gold technique to see how it looks against the fire. So on this shoulder pad, what I've done is I've actually used the old shining gold as the first layer colour on this. I think it's pretty close to Retributor armour, but I've still got a pot of the old shining gold, so I'm using that. Then highlighted it with Auric armour gold over all the raised areas, and then finally gone in with a very fine edge highlight of Stormhost silver, just to give it a bit more glow, and that's sort of the real shine there, which is why it looks so shiny. So yeah, that's turned out quite nice. So I'm going to want to do this over the whole model now, to really ornatify this. I may have just invented a word there, ornatify, but it's the word I'm using, and I think that's quite appropriate for what is essentially the living incarnation of a god. So that was by no means a quick process, but as you can see, he is now looking very, very shiny. The silver on the sort of the final highlight of that really makes it look like it's a really sort of expensive pure gold, and it's got this lovely shine to it, and so I am very happy with how that's turned out. And that, in terms of sort of hard work, is probably the most time-consuming part of the model. But there's still a few more details to go, so what I'm going to be doing next is busting out my classic gemstone technique. So this is something I use on so many models that have various gemstones or power sources or lenses, and it just gives a really nice sort of spot colour that has a nice reflective quality to it without having to resort to technical paints. So I start off by painting all of these gemstones in corn red, so you can see we've got this big one here, one in the chest and back of the hands, on the sword. This guy naturally is going to have loads of these Eldar spirit stones, so I'm going to pick out all of them in corn red. Then we get our Evil Sun Scarlet and paint over about the bottom left 2/3, maybe a tad more than 2/3. You're leaving sort of like the sorry, not left, right. You leave like the top left quarter almost in the original colour, and this covering most of it. Then I've got the old blazing orange here, but you know, any sort of mid-orange would be the next step, and that will come over just the bottom right-hand corner there, opposite of where you've left the corn red showing, and then just a tiny dot of white scar up in the top left-hand corner, just to represent the reflection of the light. So I'm going to go and do all of that on all the gemstones, and there's a fair few here, but it's quite a quick technique because obviously they're pretty small. But yeah, I will show you what that looks like when it's done. So with those gems done, you can really see it's starting to come together now, and it's yeah, looking very nice indeed. Now there is still a bit more work to do though, and the next thing I'm going to do is this loincloth here. You can see I've already painted it in Warpstone Glow, and then going to give it a wash of Biltan Green to give it some shading there. And although I'm eventually going to do the same sort of thing on the hair, I'm going to leave that till last, because if you see me paint, you see I have a bit of a bad habit of holding models by the base and the top, and that tends to wear away the top a bit, so I tend to leave like the top part of the model till last, whether it be the hair, the helmet, etc. It's going to need tidying up at the end anyway, so I tend to leave it till last. So I'm going to get some ink wash on there and be back in a minute. So I've got the ink wash on there done, and also the first layer of the highlighting. So the ink wash was with Biltan Green. Made perfect sense. Not only was it the right colour, but also, you know, the whole reason that his loincloth is going to be green is because I'm tying it into the colour scheme of my Biltan army. And then I went back to Warpstone Glow for the first layer. Warpstone Glow doesn't have great coverage, but for this that's actually a good thing, because what you end up with is kind of a partial coverage Warpstone Glow, and then you do a second layer, so you manage to get two layers of the same colour, with one slightly less than the other to start to build up the texture there. Then we're going to highlight with Warboss Green once we've done the second Warpstone Glow layer, and finally edge highlight with Skarsnik Green to just bring out the most raised areas on the loincloth. So yeah, that should give us quite a nice look there, and I think the green will contrast well with the much darker colours on the body. The green obviously contrasts nicely with the red as well, so that should be looking pretty good once that's done. So that's the loincloth done, and generally quite pleased with how that's coming out. It's not looking too great on the camera, but the contrast is a bit more subtle, and the layering in person, so that's nothing too much to worry about there. And I'm going to finish that off later with a nice big, probably transfer, although it may end up being freehand, of the Rune of Khaine right in the middle, maybe the Biltan symbol down there as well, but we'll see about that later on. For now, I want to carry on working with the model, and the next thing we're going to do is give it a bit of a tidy up on all the black areas, because you can see there's a few places where various other colours have gone onto the black. So I'm going to go back to Abaddon Black and do that, and then I'm going to try and highlight the black. Now, highlighting black is always a tricky thing, because sometimes you go too subtle and it doesn't even look like it's been highlighted, but only a little bit more and you can go too far the other way and it just looks grey rather than black. Now luckily there aren't many areas that are actually going to need highlighting on the black, because a lot of these end in the lava and we've got the kind of the red glowing effect there. But places like here up on the crest and around the face we are going to highlight, and going to start with a very subtle highlight of Eshin Grey, and then just on the most raised areas, being really careful not to overdo it, we're going to go with Dawnstone. like I say, black can be a challenging one to highlight. Often I will just dry brush with Dawnstone, which gives a more subtle effect, but I think for this model we can put the bit of extra time in to do the Eshin Grey and then Dawnstone double layered highlight. So yeah, I'll come back once that's done, show you what that looks like. With that done, the painting side of the model is quite close to completion now. Obviously I've still got to do the hair, but I'm going to do that last. And I want to do some rune work on the loincloth, but I'm thinking I might use transfers for that. And you can see the highlight is quite subtle on the grey, but it just helps to make him look a bit tidier. So I'm pleased with how that's come out. Now, next thing I want to do though is the base, because it's going to have quite a lot of drying on it, so get sort of a start on that while I think about quite how I'm going to do the other bits. The one other thing I might do is do some like firework on this head crest here, so maybe like sort of lightning bolts of fire up there. I'll see how it looks once everything else is done, decide whether or not I want to give that a try. It might be that once I've done everything else, to be honest, it doesn't need it and it'll be too busy a model, but yeah, we'll see. Anyway, the base. So for most of my Eldar army I've just used a Grelin Earth as the main base, but with this having a bit of a larger base, wanted to add some points of interest to it while still keeping with the overall desert theme of my bases. So I've got some rocks, and best thing to use to make rocks is just rock. These are bits of slate that GW used to sell for basing. I don't know if they still make them, but there's plenty of other suppliers of slate, or you know, you can just nip down to the beach and pick up some rock from there. So I'm going to put a few of these onto the base to try and make some you know, sort of natural rock formations, or natural looking rock formations, you know, try and cluster a few at the front where we've got this big space on the base here, maybe a few big ones and some small ones. Hold those in place with this super glue. This holds really well. Loctite super glue is just brilliant, I love it. Yeah, I'll show you what that looks like, and then once the bases, once the rocks are dried in place, I'm going to start adding some colour to them to make them fit in with the rest of the basing scheme, and for that we're going to start off with XV88. So I've glued the rocks on, did a big pile at the front there, and then just sort of a few other ones scattered around there to try and make it look random. It's actually harder than you think to make something look random when it's not. But yeah, so I've then painted them with XV88, and once that's finished drying I'm going to wash them with Reikland Flesh Shade, and finally dry brush them with Ushabti Bone, and this is going to make them look a little bit like sandstone, which fits nicely in with the desert scheme I've got. Yeah, helps to draw the whole model together. So you can see what that looks like now. The rocks are looking quite nice, and yeah, the rocks look like rocks. Next thing to do is going to be going to want to make the base have that nice sort of desert crackle effect that I've got across the rest of my army, and so for that, using the Grelin Earth technical paint. Now you want to put a bit more of a layer of this on. It's not like you apply a thin layer, you really sort of stick it on, get a decent layer of it on there, and then it starts to crack. The thicker the layer, the more cracks you get, and that will make it look like it's a really dry, arid sort of desert region that this guy's fighting across. The Grelin Earth has dried now, as you can see it's got this nice crackle effect, and the way GW actually suggests using it just finishes here with this core crackle effect on the base. But I'm going to take it a step or two further and try and give it a bit more depth. First I'm going to go Reikland Flesh Shade. Now this has a dual purpose. Firstly, it shades it, but also it helps to hold it in, because some of the larger flakes can be a little unstable. And then once that dried, just give it a quick dry brush in Ushabti Bone, which will help to highlight it and mean that it's going to be basically the same colour as the rocks on there. And then finally just paint around the rim of the base with XV88 to tidy it up. Now the base is all complete, and you can see it's got this nice desert effect there, and then we're going to finish this off with the loincloth and the hair. So I'm going to put a nice rune on the loincloth, and was going to use the Rune of Khaine, but looking through the Eldar transfer sheet doesn't seem to actually have a Rune of Khaine, which seems wrong, but I just can't find it on there. So instead, got the Biltan symbol here, going to put that on there, and to prepare for that I've already put a coat of this Vallejo satin varnish over the loincloth so that the rune takes nicely, and then once I've attached it and it's dry, going to give it another coat of satin varnish to lock it in. That's all done now, and the second coat of satin varnish on there is just helping to stop the transfer from moving around or getting rubbed off. And then going to finish up with the hair. Now, as you can see, it's worn away a little bit there where I've been resting my finger on it. It's a little bit of a bad habit I have. I really should hold by the base, but I just find it steadies the miniature better holding it like that. But anyway, to finish it off, I'm going to put the warpstone glow back on there just to tidy it up, and then we're essentially going to do the same colours as we used for the loincloth, but using dry brushing rather than layering. So warpstone glow and then a wash of Biltan green before we then dry brush up through warpstone glow, warboss green and scarsnit green, with the possibility that I might finish up with a 50-50 mix of scarsnit green and white scar depending on how it looks. But yeah, that's going to finish the model off, so I will come back once that's done. And with the hair complete, the avatar is now done. And yeah, I think that's come out quite nicely. You can see the sort of the different layers of colour in there, and the two green areas, the loincloth and the hair, help to tie him into the rest of my Biltan Eldar force. Obviously the rest of the miniature sets him apart as being something very different, where we've got this very shiny gold, the lava, the black, but that ties him back into the rest of the army, so he will fit in while still standing out, as much as that is somewhat of a contradiction. But yeah, I was a bit worried tackling this mini at first that the lava and the fire might be very difficult to do because it's quite small areas, but I think, you know, it's come out very nice once it's contrasted up against the black, and then you've got the gold to make him really quite impressive and almost noble looking. I was considering maybe doing some blood effect on the hand with the Blood for the Blood God technical paint, but to be honest, this fire effect I think looks really cool, and you know, it's nice. I'm happy with it, so that's the most important thing, I guess. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments section of this slightly different style of video. Rather than doing like a painting tutorial, did it more as kind of a log of my progress. And some of these techniques, particularly like the basing, I've got another tutorial on that on my channel already, so yeah, I'll try and remember to stick a link in the description. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon. Bye!